Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. Okay, so we are now beginning our part 3. Part 1 was a series of lectures talking about why we need religion. Part 2 was a series of lectures mentioning why Islam is true. So far so good? Now we will dive into the actual content of the class, which will itself be divided into 2 parts. Maybe I'll do a part 3, part 4, or part 3a, part 3b. The purpose of this class is modern theology, as you know. And as you're aware, one of the goals that we're trying to do is to look at issues that are of concern to our generation and not regurgitate controversies that have been forgotten in the annals of history. So, we have a long series of issues that are troubling, that people are trying to grapple with, that might even cause doubts about Islam, that might even cause people to leave Islam. That list is quite long, and it can be divided, I think, quite easily into 2 categories. The first category, problems that are not new, they've been discussed and rehashed, but for whatever reason, they have come back to the forefront, or perhaps they never left the minds of people in the first place. So even though the class is modern theology, because these are theological questions that we're still grappling with, we will tackle them, okay? And examples of this are, well, why don't I ask you? Give me some examples of theological problems that are not new. They go back, but we're still grappling with them. Give me some examples. Yes. Okay, well, that's the topic of today, which I wanted to leave to the end. Good. How do we explain evil? Very good. No, this is the topic of today. Other examples, yes. The understanding the names of Allah. Do you really think that's a modern issue? So, yeah, I will get to this issue, but I feel this issue, the only reason it's a point of contention is because people continue to drag on the discussions for 1,000 years. If you were to eavesdrop on an MSA that is discussing theological problems that hasn't studied in any madrasa, right? If you were to eavesdrop on an undergraduate that took a bunch of classes, history, philosophy, political science, and then they came together to discuss Islam, I would venture the sifat would never come up. The only people that will bring up the controversies of the attributes are those that have attended a halaqah from another scholar. That scholar has introduced them to the classical controversy, and now they are bringing it to the campus. So we will discuss it, but not in a lot of detail. Other controversies that are probably still modern. In the back, yes. Excellent. Predestination has never been solved. We're going to tackle it. It's never when it's never been solved means people still debate it. We still discuss this from high school, even middle school. Excellent. What else? We're still talking about. Sisters, anybody? Classical problems that we're still talking about. Yes. How to deal with various interpretations and sectarianism. We will actually, that is on our agenda as well. How do we deal with, who gets to decide? How do we navigate? I mean, there's not just one Islam. We like to say, oh, Islam is one. Okay, well, let's get real. No, it's not. There's many interpretations. And there's constant drama between these interpretations. Constant, refutations. And this guy's this and this guy's that. And the average Muslim is absolutely confused. We will tackle this issue as well. Anything else? There's many more to come, yeah. No, that's not classical. I meant, we'll get to the modern ones. Evolution is a very modern one, right? No scholar 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Yes. So why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause everybody to believe this question is tacked on to why is there evil? It's the same thing, but yes, why doesn't? What else? What else? Yes. Excellent. Eternal punishment. This is a problem that we're still grappling with. Eternal punishment, and then linked to that is something else. Exactly, yes. MashaAllah, so you guys are on the same wavelength. Okay, all of these topics that you mentioned are all on my list already. MashaAllah, that's great. If you have other topics, feel free to suggest on your group chat, because I told you from day one, this is an organic class. Not organic chemistry, organic class. Which means you will help shape the class, and we will meander along. The good news is there's no end date. Inshallah, we just keep on wandering. So these are some. There are many more. Of course, modern theological issues is a whole different topic. And once we're done with the classical theological issues, then we're going to move on to the modern issues. Liberalism, secularism, feminism, Darwinism, evolution, science and the Qur'an. That's a whole bunch of topics, inshallah. Allahu alam. How many years we're going to take? But that's the point. We're going to take this journey together bit by bit. And the goal, as I said, really is to eventually, inshallah ta'ala, write a book on modern theology. That's really the goal that I am particularly aiming for. Jayyid. With all of this introduction, now let us begin our class today. And it's not going to be just one class. We're going to be talking about this topic for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's see. We don't know how many weeks. We're just going to keep on going, taking your feedback. And that is one of the classical problems that is still modern. And that is the issue of theodicy. What is theodicy? Theodicy is the technical term to a philosophical/theological problem. Theodicy is a term that goes back roughly 350 years, and even though the term only goes back 350 years, the concept goes back 3,000 years. In fact, the earliest recorded histories, in fact, we can even go and say it really predates even the existence of man, as I will discuss today in other lectures. And that is, theodicy means, basically, how can the divine goodness allow for suffering and pain? How can a all-powerful, all-merciful God allow for the problems we see in the world around it? Why? Why is there cancer in children? Why do tsunami waves kill, millions of people? Why is there bloodshed and war? Why are the people of Gaza starving? What is the wisdom? Why would a God that is all-powerful and all-merciful do this? And this is a universal topic that is found in the ancient philosophers. It is found in Judaism. It is found in Christianity. It is found in Hinduism, Buddhism. It is found in secular philosophies. It is even found in religions that are no longer existent, as we're going to come to today. And I'm fairly positive, I'm not going to have a show of hands here, but if I were to say, how many of you yourselves have grappled with this problem? I don't want to have a show of hands, but in your hearts, raise your hand, right? How many of you have had to see these images that you're seeing, and you're like, why? Why is this happening? What is the wisdom behind this? And I would be fairly confident to say the majority of us, more than 80-90% of us, these thoughts come and we might not have solid answers for them. Now, alhamdulillah, for the vast majority of us, even if we don't have answers, we just resign ourselves to Allah's wisdom. Do realize that this same question, when it is not answered properly by people of little or no iman, unfortunately it causes large groups of them to actually leave iman completely. There was a survey done by the Barna group in like 5 years ago, entitled Generation Z. It was done by a non-Muslim group, and it was a national research on teens and young adults about why they had left belief. And amongst non-Christian teenagers, the number one problem that they polled in the next generation, Generation Z, the number one problem that caused them to leave their faith was the problem of evil and suffering. 29% of those who used to be faithful and had left the faith in this poll, 29%, basically almost 1 out of 3. And this is in non-Christian religions. That's basically us, because the people who did the survey, they were of a Christian background, so they just had 2 categories, Christian or non-Christian. I mean, khair, that's their, it's fair for them. They wanted to find out. Within Christianity, by the way, I found this interesting. Within Christianity, the problem of evil was the second or third. It wasn't number one. What was number one? They couldn't believe in their doctrines anymore. I found that interesting. That amongst Christians, they just couldn't come to terms with their theology. Or another issue that was also big on that list was the scandals or the improper actions of the church, or bad experience in the clergy, whatever. So that was interesting for me, that non-Christian religions, which would include us and other faith traditions, that have left their faith, the number one issue that poll found was what we're discussing today and the next few weeks, and that is theodicy. And within Christianity, theodicy was not number one. It was there, it was in the top 5 or top 4, I forgot which number it was, but the number 1, 2, 3 were basically church theology, church scandals, the handling of this and that, and other things of that nature. So let us set up the stage here. And again, realize we will take a few weeks. I'm not going to give you a clear-cut answer in just one day. We're going to set up, we're going to take our time, we're going to explain, and we're going to begin with a brief crash course in the history of this problem. Because it is important to understand this problem is not coming out of thin air. This problem has been the topic of great discussion and philosophical dialogue, theological debate, quite literally for all of human history, quite literally. And I will argue even before human history. So from our perspective, and when it comes to recorded human history, one of the earliest Greek philosophers by the name of Epicurus is considered to be basically one of the first to verbalize this problem in a simple, succinct, cogent manner. And this is called the Epicurus paradox. It's actually called the Epicurus paradox. Epicurus died 270 BC. So this is 2,000, 300 years ago. 270 BC, before Christ. And he basically said that we know for a fact evil exists, pain exists, suffering exists. We know for a fact there's great evil in this world. Then he says, every single religion claims that God is all-powerful and all-merciful. He then says, but this is paradoxical. Because if God is all-powerful, if God is all-merciful and there's evil, then this means He doesn't want that mercy, or He doesn't have the power to make His mercy encompass everybody. Hence, one logical possibility is that God is wanting to eliminate evil, but He's not able to eliminate evil. So he says this means that God is not omnipotent. He goes, that's not true. Let's move on to the next one then. The next one is that God is capable, He is powerful, but He's not merciful. This would also explain evil. He has the power to eliminate, but He doesn't want to. And he says, such a God, we would all assume, is a God that is not merciful. So either God is not all-powerful, or God is not all-merciful. Then he says, but this doesn't make sense, because we all affirm God to be all-powerful and all-merciful. Then where does evil come from? What was Epicurus' solution? He didn't have one. That's why it's called the paradox. And in fact, in his own life, probably his solution was the following. He basically, so Epicurus is considered to be the first agnostic, or one of the first agnostics, that he didn't really believe in the gods of ancient Greece. He didn't really have a relationship with any of them. He didn't go to their temples, and his writings seem to dismiss the gods. Some have said he was an atheist, but the most academics say he was closer to what we would call a philosophical deist, which means maybe God created the world, but God has nothing to do with our world right now. So his solution to the problem of evil was to basically imagine a distant, non-relationship God, a God that doesn't care about the world. He created it and then He just left it be. And that philosophical trend still exists to this day. It was actually quite common 300-400 years ago. Many of the founding fathers were actually deists, not Christians. Thomas Jefferson included, wasn't a card-carrying Christian. He was actually closer to Epicurus' version. Obviously Epicurus wasn't a Christian, but his version of God. So the point is that this question of evil literally caused people like Epicurus to just become skeptical of God. If he became skeptical of God, other faith traditions went even more radical than Epicurus. In fact, according to anthropologists, of course we don't believe this theologically, but anthropologically, the claim is that the oldest religion in the world is Zoroastrianism. Now obviously for us the oldest religion is Islam, except that recorded history doesn't have it. So obviously Adam was a Muslim, Nuh was a Muslim, and then after their time frames other religions came, and history documents those other religions. We don't have documents of these earliest religions according to us. So anthropologists and religious historians claim that Zoroastrianism is of the oldest religions that is still practiced in the world today. It predates Hinduism, it predates Christianity, and of course they're still around, they're very small. And Zoroastrianism attempted to solve this problem in the core of its theology. Zoroastrians believe that there are two cosmic forces, Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the source of truth, goodness, and Angra Mainyu or Ahriman. And Ahriman is a destructive spirit, the source of evil, the source of lies. He's a malicious, evil, powerful spirit. Now, Zoroastrianism did not actually posit that there are two gods. Zoroastrianism believes that there is one supreme God, Ahura Mazda, and there is an evil entity that is quite powerful, but not fully powerful. And they believe there is a war going on between Ahura Mazda and Angra until eventually Ahura Mazda will overcome and evil will be eliminated, and that will be Judgment Day. So Zoroastrianism solved the problem by saying evil doesn't come from the God. All evil comes from this entity called Ahriman. Okay? From Zoroastrianism came another strand that actually took this problem. Now again, why are we talking about this? Because this problem is so seminal, it shaped other religions. This problem is not trivial. This problem troubled the minds of people so much that their theologies were a result of trying to solve this problem. How do you solve evil? Well, okay, this must mean God is there, and there must be another entity evil is coming from. So there was a man born and raised in the Zoroastrian environment around 250 CE, whose name was Mani, and he said he was a prophet. And Mani took the ideas of Zoroastrianism to its logical conclusion. What did Mani say? Mani said, there are two all-powerful gods. No other religious philosophy in all of human history had this belief. Even Hinduism doesn't believe in equal, co-equal, all-powerful gods. Even Hinduism does not believe that there's multiple all-powerful gods. The ancient Greeks did not believe this. The ancient Romans did not believe this. All of mankind believes there is one ultimate God, one supreme God. And then most non-Abrahamic faiths believe there are multiple demigods, semi-gods, right? Like the Greek pantheon, like the Roman, like the Hindus. The only religion that actually posited there are two co-equal, co-eternal, equally powerful gods is the religion that came out of Zoroastrianism, and it was called Manichaeism. Manichaeism. Manichaeism was founded by Mani. By the way, so if you read any classical Muslim theology book, you will learn a lot about Manichaeism. They quote Manichaeism a lot. In fact, so Manichaeism, by the way, again, all these are tangents. Inshallah, I hope you benefit, guys. I mean, the point is just benefit you guys and, as I said, meander through intellectual history and just be amazed at, subhanAllah, our ups and downs and how we learn from the past. So I find this interesting. I hope you guys find it as well interesting. Some of this stuff is just going to come impromptu. So I hope, inshallah, it's of interest. What was I saying? So great giants like Al-Bayruni. I have a whole library chat about Al-Bayruni. He's one of my favorite characters. Go listen to it. Al-Bayruni was somebody who was an Arab who traveled through India, learnt ancient Sanskrit, studied with Hindu pundits and priests in like the 3rd, 4th century. And he wrote one of the earliest human chronicles of Indian history and theology. And it's in Arabic, it's available, you can read it. And Al-Bayruni was a polymath, he was an intellectual genius. And Al-Bayruni met many people who belonged to this group, the Manichaeans. In Arabic they're called Al-Manawiyya. Al-Manawiyya. Because they were still around in his time frame. They were in Iraq. They were in other pockets. Al-Manawiyya, the Manichaeans, they influenced various other groups as well. Various groups in Christianity, various other philosophies as well, but eventually they fizzled out because no state supported them. Unlike Zoroastrianism, which was supported by the official Sassanid Empire, the Sassanid Empire was Zoroastrian. And so again, when the Muslim empires came and they conquered the Sassanid Empire, so Manichaeism then only remained alive in small pockets, but there was no state-sponsored support. They weren't powerful anyway. Eventually they fizzled out. As for Zoroastrians, many of them fled to India. In fact, that was the default. Those that were eager to practice their faith, they fled to India. And when they came to India, they were called the Persians or Parsis. And so Zoroastrians, most of them to this day, are actually Indians because they fled the Muslim conquest to Persia and they sought refuge in pagan India, like Hindu India. And so they lived there for many, many, many generations. And most most Zoroastrians, actually, I'm pretty sure almost all of them are from India. Maybe there are some small pockets here or there. Anyway, there's all a side tangent. Al-Manawiyya became an obsession for the Muslims. Why? Because they used the Manawiyya to demonstrate the dangers of non-Sunni theology, believe it or not. We're going to come there later on in a few weeks. This is all a part of our course. Okay, Sunni theologians loved quoting the Manawiyya because Sunni theologians said, if you're not careful and you don't understand this topic of evil and of predestination and of who creates good and evil, you might potentially end up like the Manawiyya if you don't follow orthodoxy. How so? We're going to come there in a few weeks. But just keep this point in mind, that Manichaeans, Al-Manawiyya, they existed in the 3rd, 4th, 5th century, and Muslim theologians wrote a lot about them in order to refute extremism when it comes to ascribing evil to another entity, right? They said this is very problematic. We're going to come to this point because everything essentially comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the hadith in Sahih Muslim says, نُؤْمِنُ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ وَحُلْوِهِ وَمُرِّهِ. We believe in qadr, the good and the bad, the sweet and the bitter. We believe in qadr, the good and the bad, and the sweet and the bitter. In the end, Allah is the creator. That is what Sunnism says. And non-Sunni groups that attempted to differentiate, Sunni said, careful, if you don't understand where you're heading, you're going to end up like the who guys? The Manichaeans, the Manawiyya. Okay, good. Anyway, so that's one tangent of history. Another tangent that discussed this very difficult issue is, of course, the Abrahamic religions. And the Abrahamic religions, beginning with Judaism and then Christianity, they also grappled with the problem of evil. And again, much can be said. This is not a class on them too much, but I wanted to introduce you to just one particular story in the Bible and how various people have interpreted it. And that story is the quintessential story of pain and suffering, and that is the story of Job or Ayub. The story of Job or Ayub. Of course, he's called Job in the Bible, Ayub for us. And the biblical story is a little bit different than the Quranic one. Go read it, or just go, read a summary of it. The Quranic one is slightly different, as with all stories. And the biblical story, basically, it's really weird, of course, for us. It is Allah proving to shaitan. It's like a conversation. It's a conversation between shaitan and Allah. This is not in the Quran. This is not in Islam. In the biblical version, shaitan is basically taunting, making fun. That the only reason Ayub is your servant, the only reason Job is worshipping you, is because he's a multimillionaire with 10 kids. You gave him everything, that's why he's worshipping you. And so Allah says, what if I were to show you, like astaghfirullah, as if Allah has to prove anything. I mean, the whole conversation for us is astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. The whole thing beginning to end. But anyway, so in the Old Testament, what if I were to show you, what if I would take it away? Well, he wouldn't worship you. Okay, then I'm going to take it away. Okay, so then Ayub is basically deprived, one thing after another. He loses all of his kids. He loses, all of his wealth. He loses he was a very handsome man. And of course, he's stuck with leprosy. And then he has to leave the city over and over. And throughout all of this, Ayub maintains faith. And so basically, astaghfirullah for even saying this, God wins over the devil. As if, but again, that's the biblical version. Okay. Now, the story of Job has been a constant source of trying to solve the problem of evil, and multiple Christian theologians have used the story as the template. And again, just to give you 2 or 3 examples, in early Christianity, like one of the first great giants of early Christianity, St. Augustine. St. Augustine dies 430 CE, so he's before the process of 140 years. St. Augustine, who really does have some good writings if you read them. His confessions are really a very deep, spiritual, mystical, opening up to God. It's a very powerful book. So St. Augustine, he sees Job as a paradigm of patient endurance against trial. Evil and suffering, according to him, are not created by God, but actually result from the misuse of free will. And Job or Ayub's trial exemplifies how the righteous can suffer without personal guilt. So he wants to affirm both human freedom and divine justice. This is a type of Mu'tazilism which we're going to come to. St. Augustine was a proponent of free will, but he also believed in divine justice. So for him, Ayub or Job is an example of righteous endurance. 1,000 years later, another great theologian of the Christian religion, St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas, of course, you should be aware, is deeply influenced by Islamic falsafa. St. Thomas Aquinas quite literally read Ibn Rushd directly from translation, and he absorbed many of the ideas of Ibn Rushd, and he then proposed them in Christianity. So, ironically, unbelievably, and yet factually correct, much of Catholic theology is directly taken from Ibn Rushd. If you read Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs for the existence of God, you will find that he literally copied and pasted Ibn Rushd paragraph by paragraph. So what is taught in theological seminaries to this day of the Catholic sect, because St. Thomas Aquinas is their main architect, is quite literally coming straight out of Islamic falsafa. So St. Thomas Aquinas, he also writes about the problem of evil, and he mentions that Job or Ayub demonstrates that human wisdom cannot understand Allah's wisdom. That it is only Allah who can understand Allah's actions. And so for him, the problem of evil is a mystery. You will never fully comprehend it, and the job is to submit and not to challenge. So you have a more, if you like, pietistic, a more humble attempt to say, this is, Ayub demonstrates, or Job demonstrates, that in the face of evil, it's not our job to try to understand it. Because Job never tried to understand why that is happening. It was a mystery, and he kept it a mystery. And so for him, he basically bypasses the whole issue of theodicy, and he says our mind should not go there. Little bit pre-modern, one of the greatest Christian intellectuals of basically pre-modernity, or just the beginning of modernity, and that is Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard died 1855, and he is from Denmark. Denmark, correct? Denmark, right? Denmark? Pretty sure it's from Denmark. One of the Norwegian or Finnish countries, or Scandinavian countries. Kierkegaard also, he's considered one of the last great, if you like, Christian theologians and philosophers. Kierkegaard basically says that Job demonstrates the paradox of faith. This is what it means to be faithful. That you must continue to push through and have an attachment with God when it appears that God has abandoned you. This is, he calls it, the existential leap of faith. That's what he calls it. The existential leap of faith. That you have to hold fast to God even when life seems meaningless or unjust. And what he particularly admires is, in the Bible, Job is wrestling with his conscience. The Qur'an has no such thing. The Qur'an does not have any type of, existential crises of Job, of Ayub. But the Bible has a little bit of that. And so for Kierkegaard, that wrestling, God, why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong? That honesty is what Kierkegaard likes. And he says that the existential leap of faith, that in the midst of suffering, it's not about understanding evil. It is about living through the paradox of believing in a God when the God seems absent from your life. That is what faith is. Believing in Him when you don't even see Him around you. Okay, so for him, he again has his interpretation of doing so. And there are others as well. For those of you who are interested, one of the recent theologians, most of you probably don't even know he's a theologian. How many of you have read or seen the cartoons or the movies, The Chronicles of Narnia? Quite a few. The author was a committed Christian who wrote the entire series of books in order to introduce Christian theology to children. The entire story of Narnia. Who is Aslan? Who is the lion? Who is the son of the king, overseas and whatnot? Yes, I did read it as a child. Okay, so yes, I read the whole thing. But that was literally 40 years ago. Cut me some slack, or 38 years ago. Yeah, I read the whole series. I didn't watch the cartoons, don't worry. But yes, I read it. I loved it. And I had no clue that I was bamboozled. I was fed a lie. C.S. Lewis wanted to preach Christianity through the Chronicles of Narnia. Because if you understand that, It's exactly that story. So believe it or not, he was actually a very learned philosopher and theologian, and the child's book was a side hobby basically. Interestingly enough, C.S. Lewis was great friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, and they were both friends with a third, is it Eliot or whatever? So three Cambridge professors would all come together and sip their tea with their upper finger up like this. They have to sip their tea like this. It's a joke, guys, you can laugh. So they all sip their tea, not coffee. Coffee was not in vogue in the 20s and 30s. And they would spread their story. Anyway, why am I talking about this? Anyway, they would spread their stories together in a cafe in Cambridge. And from those conversations, 3 classics came. J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. He was not a committed Christian. He was another religion. And so he was a Christian, but he wasn't like, there was no Christianity per se. There's rumors, but there's no Christianity. C.S. Lewis was a committed Christian, and the book was entirely guise of Christianity. Anyway, C.S. Lewis also has a lot of analysis of theodicy, which is interesting to read. But anyway, that's besides the point. Jayyid. So this is, in a nutshell, the fact that Christians, pre-Christians, Greeks, the Manichaeans, Zoroastrians, they've all tried to grapple with the issue of evil. Now, why is this question so important? This question is important because it deals with a lot of different issues: philosophical, theological, and existential. On the philosophical level, one needs to understand what it means to believe in God. Is it logically consistent to believe in an all-powerful and all-merciful God when there is evil? This is a philosophical question. And the central critique of atheism, one of the main critiques of atheism, is the question of evil. Go listen to the majority of the so-called prophets of atheism. They make fun of prophets, they say we're the prophets of atheism. Go listen to Sam Harris and go listen to the other people out there that mock religion. The number one issue that they constantly bring up is the issue of evil. So this is a very philosophical question. And in a survey done by an organization that deals with ex-Muslims, they have a survey, why did they leave Islam? And one of the top 10 reasons, once again, was the issue of evil. Not the top, but one of the top reasons was the issue of evil. So this is not a trivial question. It's a very difficult question. On the theological level, we have to balance between Allah's qudra and Allah's justice and Allah's rahmah all simultaneously. How do we understand Allah's qudra, power, along with Allah's adl, justice? Because yes, shaitan comes to us and says, what is the justice, what is the adl of a child being killed in this manner? When the bomb falls, when this happens. Shaitan comes to us and asks us to explain, and maybe we don't have an answer to that. And then also the issue of Allah is supposed to be Arhamur Rahimin, and He is Arhamur Rahimin. How then do we reconcile all of this? How do faith communities interpret disasters and illness and casualties and war and natural calamities? These are all difficult questions to grapple with. And then existentially, as I said, factually speaking, people's iman is shaken to the core when they cannot understand this question. And some people end up leaving the faith. Almost all of you are struggling, or at least attempting to answer, and maybe many of you don't have solid answers. So this is why this question is extremely important. And before we conclude with some nasiha because again, I'm not going to answer it right now, it's going to take a number of times. We want to mention, as Muslims, for us, this question predates humanity. It is really important for us as Muslims to understand this question is actually the first question that even the angels asked when they found out we are going to be existing along with them. It's actually the first story in the Qur'an. Open up the Qur'an. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Your Lord announced. This is before Adam is created. This is before Adam is there. This is before the angels are told to bow down to Adam. It's just the announcement to the angels. I am creating a new creation who shall be a khalifa. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. The first and the only question the angels asked is basically the question of evil and pain and suffering. قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء. Are you going to make a new creation that is going to cause evil? Fasad is evil. يفسد فيها. They're going to cause evil. In the world of the angels, there is no evil. In the world of the angels, there is no jealousy. There is no backstabbing. There is no backbiting. There is no slandering. There is no stealing. وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. And they're going to be killing one another. The angels don't go to civil war. The angels don't bomb each other. The angels don't kill. That doesn't work that way. And the malaika, who are purer than us, better than us iman-wise, we can't compete with them, more intelligent than us, the malaika were struggling with this very question. Ironically, even before the question existed in real time. Meaning, there are no humans. There is no fasad by humans. There is no bloodshed by humans. So before even we can say evil existed, the problem of evil was problematized. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Before even evil existed, the problem of evil was problematic for a species better than us, more pure than us, more holy than us, more intelligent than us. And even they were struggling. Why would you do this, O Allah? I mean, essentially, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا. They are not challenging Allah's wisdom, they're seeking to understand it. Oh Allah, why would you do this? And here we are. The world is great without these new creatures called human beings. The existence is beautiful. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We are constantly praising you, glorifying you. It's nothing but peace and peace. Why would you create this species that is going to cause so much evil? Now, we're going to come back to this ayah, but notice, they ascribed evil to whom? Humans. قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. And this is deep, because other groups are going to say, this means evil emanates from humans. And Sunnis say no. But the verse, so we're going to explain this, right? Ahl Sunnah has an explanation. Sunnis have their theology in this issue, that we don't ascribe evil to Allah, but Allah is the creator of everything. And we're going to come back to this point here. My point right now is to understand the question of evil predates the existence of evil. And Allah Azza wa Jal answered the angels in a way that we need to begin our inquiry. Allah answered the angels by reminding them of facts that they have to keep in mind. And that is the hierarchy of knowledge. What was the response of Allah? What did He say? إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Notice, Allah Azza wa Jal did not attempt to answer the question in a manner that we would consider philosophical, logical. Allah did not break down, oh, let me explain why. Point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. He didn't do that at all. And if He wanted to, He could have, because in other cases, Allah says, I'm making this haram for you because alcohol, it causes more damage. He literally explains, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla explains a reasoning, okay, that this is harmful, this is that. Whereas when it comes to evil, in this verse at least, Allah did not explain. Are there explanations? Yes, there are. But this is the fundamental premise of how we will begin the discussion. And that is, frankly, bluntly, know your place, O human. Know your place, O human. You are not God. And you will have to reckon with the fact that there is a God and evil exists. Because here's the point, and I'm going to say this over and over again. Those who reject God because they don't understand evil have neither solved the problem of existence nor solved the problem of evil. Whereas those who believe in God and don't understand the problem of evil have at least solved the problem of existence, and then the problem of evil still remains in their minds unknown. In other words, in an attempt to understand the problem of evil, those who reject God actually end up with a far longer list of problems that they haven't solved. Because, okay, you rejected God. Does evil still exist? Yes. Do you understand it? No. Okay, the problem still remains. Now, who created you? What's the purpose of life? What are you doing here? So the whole part 1 that we did, the need for religion, right? They have no reasons for that. They have no answers for that. So the arrogance of rejecting God because they couldn't understand a particular question, and then the result of that is neither has the question been answered, and nor even a whole longer series of questions that they could have answered. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal begins this problem of theodicy for us with a hierarchical fact. Know your place. God shall always know more than you. Once you begin the conversation with that hierarchy, then you can extrapolate some wisdoms that give you comfort. You might not solve the problem, but you will gain enough that you can live with some hope, with some courage. But if you attempt to solve the problem with the arrogance of, I need answers, then who are you to challenge Allah? Who are you to make yourself an equal with the wisdom and the power of Allah? So this story for us, the story of Adam and the angels and Allah Azza wa Jall's announcement, this story is actually seminal in our journey in this topic, because as we're going to come to next week, we will begin with humility and not arrogance. We'll begin with submission and not a sense of equality, that I am demanding answers for this. And if we begin with that humility, that look, I know there's a God, and I know there's evil, and I know Allah's knowledge is more than mine. Once you have that paradigm, then perhaps the Qur'an has the Qur'an has lots of wisdoms. And those wisdoms will satisfy a believer that has humility. As for the one who has no humility, then nothing will satisfy them anyway. And we will inshallah ta'ala discuss various responses, the Mu'tazili response, the Ash'ari response, the Ibn Taymiyyah or Hanbali response, the mystical response. Maybe even if we have time, we'll get into some of the secular responses as well. And then we will inshallah ta'ala conclude with some practical advice. So may I now suggest some readings for you that I would like you all to read before we start next week's class. Firstly, the story of the story of Surah Baqarah once again, read it, which is the second page of Baqarah. Secondly, if you can go over the story of Ayub, and I've given a khutbah here at Epic, the wisdom of suffering through the story of Ayub, if you can go over that by next week. Thirdly, if you can go over the story of Khidr and Musa in Surah Al-Kahf. And I have given many lectures, written a book about Surah Al-Kahf. And when I say I have given, I'm not saying only listen to mine. I'm sure lots of other people have given. Just listen to any tafsir of Musa and Khidr and the story of Musa and Khidr. I have a 3-part khutbah series I've given about that as well. And I have a book on Surah Al-Kahf as well. And I'm sure there are many people that have given this. So your reading assignment then for next week, in the Qur'an, number 1, the story of angels and the creation. Once again, go over the tafsirs. Number 2, the story of Ayub. Number 3, the story of Musa and Khidr. And then in terms of books, one of the best books written is a book by my mentor and teacher, Dr. Sherman Jackson. Dr. Sherman Jackson wrote a book. The title of it is, what is the exact title? Black Suffering. What is it called? Who can tell me? Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. It's actually a very good book about the problem of evil. Let me quickly see what is the exact title. But that is probably the most easily understood book. Did you guys find it? Yeah, Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering by Dr. Sherman Jackson. This is a very user-friendly, easy, digestible book that you will gain a lot of knowledge of Islamic theology that's going to help us throughout the class. And there are other books as well. If you want, we can talk about them. But this is the best introduction. There are obviously more advanced books, a bit more technical, but this is the book that I encourage you to have for our series of classes. And with that, inshallah, we can take a few questions before our Salat al-Isha break. Bismillah. Yes, go ahead. So the brother asks, the verse in the Qur'an, وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِن سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِن نَفْسِكَ. Any evil that happens to you, it is from yourself. Allah says in the Qur'an, مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. Whatever good happens to you, it is from Allah. Whatever sayyi'ah or evil happens to you, it is from yourself. The interpretation of this verse is that evil causes evil. Sin causes pain. Disobedience to Allah will generate a sense of trials and tribulations. But for the believer, those trials and tribulations are not punishment. They are a cleansing and a kafara. So yes, any pain and suffering that happens to us, by us generically, all of us, and also some have said us here means the species of humans, not necessarily one individual to one individual. And this is further proven in the verse, and we're going to come back to these verses, so don't worry. These are key verses about theodicy. One of the most important verses about Islamic theodicy, Quranic theodicy, is the verse ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس وليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا ولعلهم يرجعون. Evil has spread in the land and in the seas. ظهر الفساد. Evil, fasad, evil has spread in the land and in the seas. Then Allah mentions 3 reasons why. So like I said, when the Qur'an says that I know what you don't know, the Qur'an does not shut down the topic of theodicy. Rather, the Qur'an has a lot of verses about theodicy. We're going to talk about them. But why is the first story mentioning I know what you don't know? To set the mental paradigm. When you talk about this, understand, you might not fully grasp, and you will have to understand that that's okay. So the problem of evil, I'm telling you from now, maybe some people will not like how I answer this question. Wallahu a'lam. I have to always look at how these things will be interpreted online. The problem of evil is only solvable if you have humility and iman. If you don't have humility and iman, there's like if you have iman, you have humility. If you don't have iman, you will never be able to solve the problem of evil. Iman is what causes you to solve it. Now, of course, the critic will say there's a circularity here. And the response is, in your rejection of our solution, you still are at square one or worse than us. You haven't solved it either, right? And once you understand, iman does give you so many wisdoms that you can grapple with evil like Ayub grappled with it. Right? Iman gives it to you. And if you want to see the living manifestation, look at Gaza as we speak. Not a single one of them, subhanAllah, has lost their faith in Allah. If anything, it's even stronger. How is that possible? You know, let me finish off with one anecdote, okay? And I don't mean to diminish or dismiss or be crude about other faith traditions, but we factually believe our faith is true, and we factually believe other faiths are not true. One of I would say one of my most interesting episodes of my own life. Almost 15 years ago, I was selected to go visit Auschwitz and Dachau as an official delegation of American imams. The first time the State Department actually had an official delegation. This was a long time ago, 15, 17 years ago. And the New York Times has a whole article about this, you can read it. And so because we were going at the State Department level, and it was an official visit, I was with like 15 imams, they managed to actually, allow us to meet people that had lived through the Holocaust. They're all dead now. No, none of them are alive. This was like 15 years ago. People who still had memories. They were all in their 90s. Okay, so this is 2010, 2009, 2010, around that time frame. Okay, and so I met a Jewish survivor of Auschwitz, and there's a picture in the New York Times of me just looking at him, and it really is. I mean, it's a very, very. Listen, guys, whatever's happening in Gaza right now, we have to be careful we don't back project our feelings to the Nazi Holocaust. What the Nazis did was absolutely inhumane. It was absolutely evil. And Muslims who were alive at that time helped the Jewish people to hide from the Nazis. The Grand Mosque of Paris, the underground basement, became a secret hideaway. The Grand Mosque of Paris became a secret hideaway. So we have to be careful we don't back project our anger to what happened over there. Two separate things. Anyway, so I met one of the Jewish survivors. I have his name somewhere. He literally unfolded his arm, and I could see the tattoo. I think that the pictures of just me, my jaw just dropping. Like, you see the tattoo, on his hand, right? So Q&A came. First hand up. That's me. First hand up. I said yes. He said yes. What's your question? I said, what did the Holocaust do to your faith in God? And with this we conclude time for the Iqamah. What he said shocked me to the core, but I shouldn't have been that shocked. His whole face changed. You could see anger. You could see rage. With a wave of the hand, he goes, there is no God. I don't believe in God. No God would have allowed what I had to go through in the Holocaust. There is no God. And I was thinking a deep, philosophical, like something, nothing but pure rage and anger. And he said the Holocaust made him an atheist. This is not something I read. This is not something I saw in a documentary. My own 2 ears, Bunch of imams were there, heard it straight from, I'm not saying everybody was like that, but this particular person who went through Auschwitz, and you could see the anger. No God would have allowed what I had to go through in Auschwitz. It destroyed my faith in God. The problem of theodicy is very real, and it causes many people to lose their faith. We don't want to be of those people. That's why we're discussing this topic bluntly, boldly, but with humility. Let's take some of the questions from here, inshallah. So, a lot of these questions are not relevant to the class. I'm fine. It's up to you guys. Where's the upvotes here? Sorry, I'm trying to see where the upvotes here. Okay, there's not that many that were upvoted. They're all 000s. 7. Okay, refresh it. Okay, so the highest question, why is Ibn Taymiyyah's positive comments on Sufiya and Ahl Tasawwuf often overlooked? Is it true that he was a part of the Qadiriyya order? Ibn Taymiyyah did indeed take bay'ah in the Qadiri tradition when he was 17, 18 years old. And that was a part of the culture of that time where every single young Muslim man would be initiated in the tariqah. And so Ibn Taymiyyah was initiated in the tariqah. But factually speaking, he never really maintained ties with the tariqah. And clearly he then moved beyond it. Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim represent a strand of critical tasawwuf. They were open to ideas of tasawwuf, but they critiqued aspects of tasawwuf. And later on, Ibn Abdul Wahhab basically revived a version of Ibn Taymiyyah thought that was anti-tasawwuf. I should say he evolved, he created. Ibn Taymiyyah was never anti-tasawwuf. That is crystal clear. And the best example for this is his student Ibn al-Qayyim and the writings of Ibn al-Qayyim and the personal life of Ibn Taymiyyah. So what he was opposed to, I would say very simplistically, are two things. Number one, philosophical tasawwuf, which is different than, I would say, Ghazalian tasawwuf, so Ibn Arabi type of tasawwuf. He didn't like that at all, in which the line between the divine and the created is blurred. He was against that. And the notion that the Sharia is not applicable to the elite of the mutasawwifa, which is kufr, and mainstream Sufis don't believe this. He was against that philosophical tasawwuf, and then he was also against the ritualistic practices that he felt were extreme deviations, which still some of the mutasawwifa are guilty of. But when it comes to the issue of the Mawlid, for example, it's very clear. Ibn Taymiyyah was not fanatically opposed to the Mawlid. You just read his writings. Unlike his followers today, he didn't make this a hallmark. He basically said, I don't think it should be done. It's a stepping stone, to worse. But those who do it, I'm sure they have good intentions, and I have no doubt Allah will reward them. That's really his attitude. That is literally his attitude. I don't think it should be done. I'm opposed to it. And I think it's going to open up a door of evil. But I have no doubt that those that are doing it, the vast majority of them are good people, and Allah will reward them for their intentions for doing it. That is exactly my opinion. Literally. Unfortunately, hardly any of his followers of our times follow this or other aspects of Ibn Taymiyyah. Again, obviously, as you know, I disagree with many of his followers, and I believe they have not understood Ibn Taymiyyah, but obviously, in return, they accuse me of being a CIA agent, so what can you do? So, this is a common question we get asked. How to deal with parents that are getting older. I'm 21, my parents are in their 60s. I do have 3 older brothers. I'm constantly thinking about their death and the fact that I'm not able to give them the luxuries I wished, etc., etc. Listen, this is a difficult question. I'm struggling with it in my own way, at a much different age than you, and you're struggling with it in your own way. I do plan to give a detailed talk when I'm emotionally capable of doing so, because my life as well is quite difficult in this chapter. But generic advice, do the best you can, and that is all, not only that Allah requires of you, but that is what is going to make your parents happy. In other words, there's nothing that's going to make your parents happier than to see your happiness and to see you doing whatever you can to make them happy. No matter if you have nothing financially, but you just spend time with them and just spend a few minutes, making your mother smile, making your father laugh. Nothing will make them happier than these small things. So you are taking on a burden that is normal, but you are burdening yourself with more by what is in the question here. Parents are not expecting you, to pay for everything for them. It's understandable. You're in your 20s. Your parents are still spending on you. Totally understandable. And when you become a parent, you will understand that sacrifice and that spending is actually a part of their joy. Allah created parents to be like angels for us, in that they sacrifice for us, and that is making them happy. Of course, there are always exceptions, so that's the exception. But most parents, Muslim or non-Muslim, their love is so much that they want to see you happy even at their own happiness. So in other words, your happiness is their happiness. Understand this point. So live life that is ethical, Islamic. Make them happy through your happiness and whatever khidmah, and that is all that you have to do. If you cannot help them financially, that's fine. They're not looking for your help when you're 20 years old, you're still in college. They're not looking for your help, but they are looking for your companionship. They're looking for the small chores you can do. They're looking for whatever you can do, and do it before it is too late, because when it is too late, we all have our regrets without exception. Every single one of us will have our regrets. And when that happens, then you want to have minimal regrets. So do as much as you can. Question here. I have heard that some of the people that were ordered to be executed at the time of the conquest of Mecca fled to India. No, this is not true to the best of my knowledge. If you have any quotations for this, bring them to me. I find this to be absolutely bizarre, because the people of the Quraysh did not have direct ties to India. It is narrated that some of them fled to the peripheries of the Arabian Peninsula, yes. It is narrated a few of them made their way into the Byzantine empires, yes. But India, no. Arabs would not go to India at this time frame and live. So this looks to be one of those fairy tales that are said in our culture. Wallahu a'lam. Question here, again I'm just answering what's on the slides. What is your view on istighatha in a poetic context? I mean, guys, you should know my views on istighatha. I got into a lot of trouble for my views on istighatha. And subhanAllah, Allah has protected people bigger and better than me for zero trouble. SubhanAllah. It's alhamdulillah, I'm not complaining. My views on istighatha, I gave a lecture here at Epic. And because of it, subhanAllah, at least 15 videos were released, which called me a zindiq and heretic and kafir and dal and mudil, whatever, ila akhiri. Istighatha, which means invoking the saints, my position is that it is haram, it is bid'ah, it is munkar, it should be avoided. But it is not shirk unless there is a belief that accompanies it, in which you believe that the being that you're calling is able to give you what you want independent of Allah, which is essentially the definition of a God. If you do not believe this, then you are not worshipping other than Allah, but you are doing something that potentially leads to worship to other than Allah. So my position is that it is haram and it should not be done, and it is munkar and it is a bid'ah, and without a doubt the Prophet did not come so that we are invoking other than Allah. But it is not shirk unless it is accompanied with a belief. The action is not shirk. By the way, the same thing can be said of sajda. You can do sajda to a being and it's not shirk. In fact, some sajdas to other than Allah were allowed pre-Islam. And Islam came and forbade those sajdas, but they're not shirk. Mu'adh ibn Jabal did sajdas to the Prophet and wasn't shirk. And the Prophet said, don't do this. I've forbidden this, don't do this. No more allowed. The Yusuf's brothers did sajda to Yusuf. It was allowed in their sharia. So when is sajda become shirk, and when is it haram, and when is it wajib? When Allah commands you, it becomes wajib. So when Allah commands the angels, it becomes wajib. When it was mubah in previous cultures, the people of Yusuf did sajda to Yusuf, and the Prophet forbade it. And in our times, to bow down in respect to another human being, it is haram, but it is not shirk. It's not going to be shirk. When will it be shirk? When you're directing an act of worship to that being, when you want to worship other than Allah. So when a pagan bows down to an idol, that is not the same as in Eastern cultures a person bows down to an elder. There is not, the action is there, the action, the intention changes. The same goes for invoking. The same exact paradigm, copy and paste, when you invoke other than Allah, if there's a belief with it. Now, you ask, what are your views on istighatha in a poetic context, such as the Qasida Burda? I am not a fan of this. It should be avoided. I understand poetry allows what other genres do not allow, but still, why open this door? And if you go and see the reality of this door being opened, if you go and listen to some of the qawwalis in India and Pakistan, right? You guys take it as a joke. Qawwali is a very serious genre of religious ecstasy. Many millions of people listen to them. and Arabic qasidas as well. Go listen to the qawalis that are very popular. The outer meanings of many of them really are bordering on blasphemy. So we have to shut this door and not allow these types of things. And I'm not a fan of, istighatha at all, but to claim that every istighatha is exactly the same as paganism is very, very dangerous. And you open the door for takfir, and you open the door for ridda and whatnot, and I'm not a fan of this, wallahu alam. I have given a technical talk in my 3-hour lecture online, which is on the Najdi Da'wah. So if you have 3 hours to spare, it's my longest YouTube video, which I did it in like 5 or 6 sessions. I go over all of the issues of istighatha and why I changed my mind. And just realize one simple fact. The only trend in Islam that considers istighatha to be shirk without any conditions is the followers or other followers of Ibn Abdul Wahhab. That's it. Every other trend without exception either considers it permissible with conditions or considers it impermissible. Nobody says it's shirk. And it should not be shirk, because when a Muslim does it, a Muslim is not intending worship. When you're not intending worship, then it is not worship. Understand this point. When you're not intending to worship other than Allah, it is not worship. Actions are by intentions. So when you're not intending to worship other than Allah, how can it be called worship? You are not worshipping other than Allah unless you intend to worship. And when will you intend to worship? When you believe the one that you are calling out to can independently give you what you are asking for without Allah's interference. Otherwise, as I explained in the longer lecture, the Sahaba themselves asked the Prophet in his lifetime. And it's understood that they're not asking him, astaghfirullah, as a God. It's understood. So the same mentality of the Sahabi asking the Prophet in his lifetime, that same mentality is in the people of Sufism. When they invoke other than Allah, they're not invoking a God. The same niyyah of asking the Prophet ﷺ when he was alive, that same paradigm exists in the person going to the qabr. I don't agree with it, but it's not shirk by any stretch of the imagination. So, very clear over here. Question here, which one is, so how evil children did that already. If somebody knows a lot of deen, teaches it to others, but doesn't practice it themselves, are they still rewarded for spreading knowledge or punished for hypocrisy? Good question. May Allah protect all of us from nifaq. This really goes back to your frame of mind. It goes back to your niyyah. Listen, nobody is perfect. None of your teachers are perfect. I am most definitely not perfect. When I teach you to control your anger, you don't think I fall short sometimes of that? When I teach you to cleanse your heart and have a pure heart, you think the one that's teaching you to have a pure heart always has an unblemished heart? We're all human. All of us are human. So understand this point, that there is a delicate balance between preaching the truth and between being a hypocrite. That delicate balance is a level of pompous arrogance, a level of comfortability that you ascribe to yourself. Elitism. You think you're better than others. If you are preaching the truth, even as you struggle with it, and you know you're struggling with it, and you ask Allah for forgiveness and guidance, inshallah, that is life. Our scholars mention that even if you're drinking alcohol, and you see somebody drinking alcohol, actually you should say to them, hey, you, don't drink alcohol, even as you're drinking it. With the intention that, hey, if I'm committing a sin, why should you commit it? Now, if you are drinking and you feel you're allowed to drink, you get away with drinking, you have no problem drinking, that is where the arrogance and elitism comes, right? So, understand, whether you are guilty of a sin or not, you must still preach against that sin. But in your private life, make sure you understand that that is a nuqsan, a deficiency, and try to recompense by doing extra good deeds and feel guilty. The minute you stop feeling guilty is the minute you are in danger. The minute you feel confident, I can preach and it doesn't matter what I do, that is the red line that you need to stop preaching. But if you are preaching, and obviously as a preacher you're going to give tons of lectures and classes, and you're going to say things sometimes that you cannot fully live up to. That is the reality. Nobody is perfect. Understand and ask Allah's forgiveness and make up in other ways, and feel that sense of guilt in this regard. So as for the verse, O you who believe, why do you say what you do not do? This applies to the one who, as I said, feels he is exempt from what he's preaching to the others. It's the arrogance of the heart that is applicable here. Question here, let's just go for another, how long? Yeah, another 5-10 minutes, and 10 o'clock we'll stop inshallah. Okay. Question here, I mean, this is a funny question. I don't know why we should do this, but it's funny here. Would you say Indians are looked down upon in the Muslim world? Why would you ask me this question? I have experienced racism because I am Desi. Okay, they give me looks, etc. This is the question here. I believe racism is found in all cultures and against all cultures. You find it in all cultures. And I believe it is against all cultures as well. There are people that are racist, even against majority cultures, whatever. It is what it is. Just be careful you don't suffer an inferiority complex. You might be reading in too much. Just be careful. And honestly, all of us have been treated in a nasty manner, including yours truly multiple times. I've been treated in a racist manner in countries and whatnot. And you know what? Your dignity comes from within, not from other people. So don't give your dignity, don't allow other people to control your dignity. Don't. And know that the prophets before you were treated contemptuously, and they are exponentially more noble than you and me. And yet they were spat upon, and they were mocked, and they were ridiculed, and they were slandered, and they maintained their dignity. So keep on remembering that dignity comes from within you. Nobody can strip your dignity away unless you allow them to do so. So turn to Allah and know, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Karam or dignity comes from Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Question here, question that is, this has been done before, I'll do it again. If you're constantly redoing a sin that you're repenting from, trying to break away from it fully, even when you feel you're relapsing, like basically some advice for that. I've said this in multiple lectures as well, and that is being guilty or having a habitual sin without a doubt is a problem. At the same time, a bigger problem is to lose hope in Allah's mercy because of that sin. A bigger problem is to think you're non-salvageable, you're unforgivable in the eyes of Allah. That is a infinitely bigger problem. So for shaitan to let you take a small sin, listen to me carefully, a perpetual minor sin does not become a major sin unless it is accompanied by a sense of arrogance and callousness. I know there's a whole controversy among scholars. Some scholars say a perpetual minor sin becomes major sin. There's no evidence for this. A perpetual minor sin remains a minor sin as long as you are turning to Allah, recognizing it's a sin, feeling guilty for it, and trying to overcome it. Just keep on trying, keep on trying. The attempt to overcome is a sign that you recognize it is a sin, hence there is a life in your heart. There is pulse in your blood, in your iman blood. The minute you just give up and say, yeah, I don't care about this sin, then it becomes a major sin. So be very careful that that doesn't happen here. So the brother is saying you're relapsing, or the sister is saying you're relapsing over and over again. Okay, you're relapsing. Don't cause your relapsing to stop your attempt to overcome or to stop doing other good deeds. One of the most effective mechanisms to prove to yourself that your heart still has iman is to penalize yourself with an extra good deed every time you commit a sin. The fact that you're going to do something you would not do because you committed a sin indicates your heart still beating. So, and this is not an excuse that every time you do it, you make in your mind. No, I'm saying genuinely feel regret and genuinely say, okay, I'm going to give sadaqah. Okay, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ah extra. Okay, I'm going to wake up for tahajjud. Make it upon yourself that every time you relapse into a sin, that you do something you wouldn't otherwise do. And inshallah, that is a sign that your heart has iman. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we all have sins that we deal with, and inshallah, keep on working on it, inshallah. Yeah. Where is that one? So, with your story about the Holocaust, so let's do the last one then, okay? Is it not reasonable for someone who witnessed such horror to lose faith? What makes them so different from the people of Gaza who haven't lost faith, even though they are seeing similar horrors? Okay, I do not think it is reasonable for somebody who has witnessed such horrors to lose faith. Not at all. Ayyub alayhi salam was tested much more than a Holocaust survivor, much more than the people of Gaza, much more, for much longer. And Allah Azza wa Jal says, "Inna wajadnahu sabira, ni'mal abdu, innahu awwab." We found him to be sabir. What a great servant he was. He continued returning back to Allah. The fundamental issue, we're going to come to this. Do you expect that you're worshipping Allah based upon quid pro quo? Do you expect it's a transaction and a bargain? Allah says in the Qur'an, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. There are people who worship Allah based on a condition. إِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٍ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. If good happens to him, he's happy, he's going to worship Allah. وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ شَرٍ. And if evil happens to him, انقلب على عقبيه. He turns and walks away. خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. He has lost this world and the next. These are all verses about theodicy. Do you think you're worshipping Allah because it's a business transaction? Allah needs your worship. Oh Allah, as long as you give me money, I'm going to worship you. As long as life is good, I'm going to worship you. What type of worship is this? You haven't understood worship. So no, I strongly disagree. They should not lose hope because, frankly, there is no alternative other than hope. There is no alternative. They should not lose faith in Allah because Allah Azza wa Jal is true regardless of what happens to you. Allah's truth and existence is not contingent on your quality of life. And you need to understand that regardless of what happens to you, Allah is true and He's deserving of worship. Now, once you understand the key difference between a person of iman and a person of no iman is that the person of iman understands all that is happening, Allah will give me more than what has been taken away. That's the switch that happens. And it will only happen if you believe in something that the person who I interviewed did not believe. And that is called the akhirah. We're going to come to this point here. Even they are having some faith. By and large, Jewish people don't believe in an afterlife. The default amongst them, they don't believe in an afterlife. It's not a part of their core belief teachings. It's not something they're teaching their people and whatnot. Most of them say, yeah, they might, we don't really care. But Christians and Muslims are the only major group that believe in an afterlife. The dharmic religions believe in a cyclical life, right? So Abrahamic religions, Judaism is ambivalent. And by and large, they've lost faith in the akhirah. Christianity and Islam believes in an akhirah. Belief in an akhirah completely reorients, because no matter how difficult life is, you have something to look forward to. You have something to look forward to. And you might even resign yourself to this dunya, but you're still optimistic of the akhirah. I'll conclude on this. I've never said this story. It is painful for me because, yeah, mashallah. You all know the grandfather of Gaza, right? Remember the grandfather? Abu Diya? Yeah, Khalid Nabhan, right? You all know the grandfather Khalid Nabhan, right? I corresponded with him. I had an interview with him. That's online. I had a live interview with him. That was online twice. Once I have it online, and once, unfortunately, so frustrating. I think that the camera was on, but they told me it wasn't recorded. I'm trying to find the video footage. I had 2 interviews with him. The one of them was on a phone call, and somebody recorded portions of it. That's online. The other one, I was in a conference, and I said to him, I want to have a video conference. So we had a live conversation back, which was much more detailed. I'm trying to get the video footage of that, but this was, there. And then I reached out to him. I haven't said this before. I reached out to him, I think a week or 2 before he passed away. I said, Sheikh, we're having a major conference in my masjid, Epic. Sheikh, please, I want you to, stream in live. And he said, find somebody else, this and that. He kept on stalling, And I just said, Sheikh, please, I really want you. And, he basically sent a message that, I don't want to quote it exactly, it's been a while, but basically I have no interest, I just want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Really appreciate all you're doing. May Allah bless you, Shaykh Yasir, everything, but I just want to go back to Allah. I want to meet my grandchildren. And a few days after that, what happened. I really it was, wow. And that's fine. You can get to that stage because he still has something to look forward to, right? He didn't lose faith in Allah. He just didn't feel the love of this dunya anymore. Big difference between the two, It's like, you know what? I don't want to do anything more. I'm just waiting to meet Allah. And he must have been making dua, and Allah accepted his dua. So that's a big difference between the other guy I met, because he doesn't have the optimism of the akhirah. So when there's no optimism of the akhirah, the only solution is there is no God. I'll never forget as long as I live, the anger, you could tell the anger that came out. He's angry at his own God. A'udhu billah, a'udhu billah. Contrast this to, Abu Diya, Khalid. I couldn't believe the stuff he was telling me when we had the phone conversations. You guys are doing amazing. I said, Sheikh, don't embarrass me. We are failing you. No, you guys are giving da'wah and what? I told him, so happy I told him, I said, Sheikh, because of your video, tens of millions of people love Islam because of him. I'm so happy I said that to him. Tens of millions of people, you have shaken their... Alhamdulillah, I said that to him. Alhamdulillah, it made me so happy. Alhamdulillah. What a giant, man. What a giant. But this is the difference between belief in Allah and not believing in Allah. No, I strongly disagree. A person's iman should be shaken? Not at all. We have living examples of people their iman isn't shaken. Because how can it be shaken? When you believe in an akhirah, and when you believe that Allah is doing this for a wisdom, right? And he said to me, when I said that to him, he said, Alhamdulillah, Allah is using me to service His deen. He understood the wisdom of what happened to him. See the point? Nobody likes it. He understood the wisdom. I get it that Allah is using me for something, right? So no, strongly disagree. Iman is never going to cause you to go the route of the guy of the Holocaust. Never. Because you have a different paradigm. And we're going to talk about that paradigm. You don't have to be happy. Nobody's happy when evil happens. You don't have to understand. But you have to, at some level, taslim, accept. And one of the ways that you do this is by affirming Allah's justice in the akhirah. All that has happened to me, I'm going to see the people that caused it, and I'm going to get my revenge on the Day of Judgment. That keeps you sane. Qiyamah brings about theodicy. And then thawab, belief that this pain is not random. My grief of my heart, it's not just going to dissipate. Everything I feel, a time will come when I will get, not even commensurate, I will get much more than what I had to suffer. So these types of ideas, when they're in your heart, you can grapple with evil. You don't like it, but you come to terms with it and you move on in life. And for some people, it will give them a different type of courage. And for others, it will be, and I understand fully at that age of his life, I fully get it. Like he's not, 20 years old, he has nothing to look forward to at that stage. You know what, I'm resigned my fate, I'm just looking forward to meet Allah. I don't want to get involved in anything. We just want to live a quiet life until Allah chooses me to go. And literally, I think the week after that was khalas, that was it. And it was, alhamdulillah. So I disagree with this analysis, and we will explain why, inshallah, in the course of the next weeks. With that, jazakumullah khair. I will see you all next Tuesday, inshallah.